Thank you, David. Um, in the preface of your book, first of all, I have to recognize that your book is simultaneously deeply liberating, at the same time very heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And I think it's very courageous the way you approach. I think a lot of the times when we look away from our own capacity to be brutal to the others, it doesn't serve the purpose.
Mm.
Um, so you start the book, the preface, that the Hutu Tutsi conflict. Let's start from there. That audience who are not familiar with the Rwandan genocide and how one group could be brutalized and
Yeah.
how please tell us about the incident and how you and why you decided to start with that.
Yeah. So the Rwanda genocide of 1994, it's not the only genocidal violence that that nation has seen. Um, was the result of very long-standing ethnic tensions between the two main ethnic groups in Rwanda, the Hutu and the Tutsi, and that goes back at least as far as Belgian colonialism. So the Belgians um, colonized Rwanda, and they pitted the two groups against one another. They treated the Tutsi as superior and the Hutu as inferior, um, and that set up a very bad dynamic. In 1994, um, uh, several events ignited uh, genocidal violence. Militant Tutsis called for basically the extermination. I'm sorry, the other way around.
Yeah.
Militant Hutus called for the extermination of the Tutsi and the extermination of moderate, reasonable Hutu. And it was one of the most terrible bloodlettings of the 20th century. In the space of 3 months, almost 1 million people were killed, and killed in extraordinarily brutal ways, sometimes with bullets, sometimes with machetes. There would be hunting parties going into the bush looking for people who had been their neighbors um, to hack them or club them to death. Really, really terrible. And Rwanda has done very well in attempting to deal with that legacy. Just by the way, so dehumanization played a role in this very famously. The propaganda produced to incite violence against the Tutsi referred to them as cockroaches, hyenas, snakes, and so on. Now, these are not pleasant animals, right? What do you do with a cockroach? Well, you step on it. There's no respect for a cockroach. Similarly, killing poisonous snakes is something which is deeply embedded in Rwandan culture, as you find anywhere where there are abundance of poisonous snakes. Right? I grew up in the southern United States. We have plenty of poisonous snakes, and killing your first snake was a ritual almost in that part of the world. Um, so that's the dehumanization bit. Now, I began with the testimony of a perpetrator. I think it's very important to understand perpetrators of this sort of terrible violence, and I mean understand seriously. Not the temptation is just to condemn, but that doesn't get us anywhere. Just saying this is evil doesn't get us anywhere at all. That's simply an evaluation. We need to know what makes it possible for human beings, ordinary human beings, to treat other human beings in this fashion. Um, we need to look at the mirror that they hold up to us, as you said in your introduction. It's it's important to understand that these people who commit these actions are not monsters. They're not crazy. They're ordinary human beings experiencing certain sorts of contexts and pressures. Now, I chose to start this way because I wanted the testimony of a perpetrator to begin the book. And this perpetrator, a man named Elie Ngarambe, talks about killing people and talks about how he and his comrades did not see the victims as human. And I think we should take that really seriously. And the reason I put it there, you see, is a lot of people are skeptical about the reality of dehumanization. They say, well, when people think of others as vermin or monsters or demons, they don't really believe that. But I think they do. And that's why I began with that testimony. And the man says, I think, very interestingly, he talks about being in an altered state of consciousness. And he says, it's something like a darkness. He uses that phrase, which I use then as the title of that preface to the book, something like a darkness. That is, under certain kinds of political circumstances, we enter a strange state of consciousness, or it's very easy to, in which we stop seeing a group of people as fellow human beings, deserving of our respect and our care and consideration, and we transform them into terrifying, demonic, monstrous entities that must be caged, that must be oppressed, that must be exterminated at the extreme.